while we're talking about IPOs, I just want to make a point. In the recent trend, it's not the IPO, it's actually an FPO. There is very rarely an IPO wherein the money has been raised for the company, for the capex or for the growth, right? This is largely an exit from a PE investor or a promoter. So from a retail investor point of view, I think one needs to be very, very careful. Yeah. While we call it an IPO is technically an exit for a PE investor.
I just want to come in on the point that Nimesh was making, because I think that is an important point. And, you know, when you talk to the likes of Nikhil Kamath, you talk to the likes of Sridhar Vembooz, and the question being asked of them is, why aren't you IPOing? Why aren't you IPOing? And the fact of the matter is, they don't need to raise the money. They don't need to provide the exit. They're sitting on enough cash at this point in time to fund whatever growth plans that they have. And they're not dependent on the need to provide an exit to an external investor, because they never drew in funds from an external investor. So their story is different, and that also bolsters the point that Nimesh was making. But there's another interesting aspect on why perhaps we've seen so many of these companies approaching the IPO market, approaching the public markets, and because we've actually seen the private markets go into a bit of a funk in the last few years. And after that kind of accelerated pace where, you know, big checks were being written out practically every other day, we did see a private market correction. We did see a private market holding back, so to speak. I mean, you talk to investors and everyone talks about how much dry powder that they were sitting on. And suddenly people were congratulating each other on the dry powder and the dry ammunition that they were sitting on, not on how much they were actually putting to work. And so that also pushed a lot of these companies, especially these new age, companies, startup companies, loosely, if you like, to look at the IPO market. So that's been another interesting aspect on why we're seeing this big rush for IPOs. But go ahead, Nimesh.
So, Shri, the other part, I mean, while we're talking about IPOs and FPOs and whatever, this is also a good point, because it's bringing in a bit of equilibrium to this market. Look, as Prashant pointed out, $64 billion is what the domestic money has come in. And of course, a lot of IPO has been sucked into. Had not been the case, India market would have been at a different level. The P's would have been every stock would have been at 100 P. So from that perspective, when I talk to some bankers and all, they say, it's needed that supply comes in, because it'll just bring a balance to this market. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a balance to this market.